U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel. He will be a part of a high-level meeting with Arab countries. The meeting includes those nations which normalized ties as a result of the Abraham Accord. Blinken arrived in Tel Aviv on Saturday evening. He will be meeting his counterparts from Israel, UAE, Morocco, Bahrain and Egypt. The aim of the meeting is to mark the shift in Arab-Israeli relations that began in late 2020. Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid has described the summit as historic. Blinken will go to the West Bank, Algeria and Morocco. Ahead of talks, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett sent a message to Saudi Arabia expressing sorrow over attacks by Iran-backed rebels on Friday. He took to Twitter and said that this attack is further proof that Iran's regional aggression knows no bounds. In February, Bennett said he was deeply troubled by prospects of a new nuclear deal. Israel fears that the deal would not prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. U.S. says two key issues are on the agenda: put an end to Israel's looming worries about a nuclear deal with Iran and discuss potential global wheat shortage caused by invasion of Ukraine. The U.S. and Iran are negotiating to revive the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The negotiations aim to prevent Tehran from developing nuclear weapons. The two countries are reportedly in the final stages of the talks. In 2018, former U.S. President unilaterally quit the nuclear deal and reimposed sanctions. Since then, Iran has resumed its sensitive nuclear activities. EU foreign policy chief says that the conclusion of a renewed accord could take a matter of days. U.S. officials say reaching a deal hinges on some key issues, but Tehran has to make difficult choices. Blinken will also meet Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah. Palestinians remain concerned that they are being forgotten. The Trump administration had closed the U.S. consulate in Jerusalem dedicated to Palestinian relations. Biden promised to reopen it. However, a year into Biden's presidency, there has been no action. Mir Javed Anfar is a West Asia analyst and also an author. He is joining us live from Tel Aviv in Israel to talk about the importance of this visit. Mir, thank you very much for your time and welcome to WION.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you.
Now, it has been touted as a first step in normalizing relations. What's the significance of strengthening Arab-Israel ties?
It's very significant in that this is the first visit by the foreign ministers of 4 Arab countries to the State of Israel at the same time, and also while the Secretary of State for the United States will also be joining them. The visit is very symbolic in that, as I stated, it's a first. It's also taking place in the Negev in State Boker, which was the kibbutz of the founding father of the State of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, a man who envisioned peace with the Arab world. And this is kind of the realization of his vision for Israel, having good relations with as many Arab countries as possible. So it has a very, first and foremost, a symbolic value, but also it's not going to be just about handshakes and photo ops. There are issues at hand to discuss. It's the issue of Iran. It's the issue of the current war in Ukraine, and also the possibility that as a result of that war in Ukraine, there's going to be food shortages in this region, and all these issues will be discussed in this summit.
Mir, we know that part of the agenda will be the worry of a looming nuclear deal with Iran. Could you give us more details about the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that U.S. and Iran are in the process of negotiating to revive it?
The 2015 Iran nuclear deal, also known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, it put Iran's nuclear program under an inspected framework. First of all, inspected in that it significantly increased the amount of inspection which Iran's nuclear program was under. It also put it on the framework, and by that I mean we knew exactly how much each time, how much enriched uranium Iran was going to have at what level as the years went by. And of course, there were a number of sunset clauses which removed gradually the limitations of Iran's nuclear program while keeping the inspections on the same level. So there were countries in this region, such as the State of Israel and a number of Arab countries, such as the UAE and Saudi Arabia, who were against the deal for at least two reasons. One of them is that it did not address Iran's presence and activities in the region, and we see the results of which the recent attacks by Iran-supported Houthis against Saudi oil fields. And the other one is Iran's missile program. And these are at least two of the reasons why these countries were against the nuclear deal. But I have to say that the US and Iran are negotiating to return to the 2015 nuclear deal. Despite some of its shortfalls, I would say it would be a positive thing if that happens. However, I have to say nothing is guaranteed. There remains at least one obstacle before which the two sides have to overcome before we can say there is a deal.
Mir, finally, is the US trying to assert itself as a peace broker? Because apart from strengthening ties and the Iran issue, Blinken will also meet Palestinian president. He will also travel to Morocco and Algeria to talk about regional security and the disputed territory of Western Sahara. What does all these say about the role of the United States?
Well, to be honest with you, let's start with the Abraham Accords. One of the main reasons why the US facilitated the Abraham Accords was because the US is losing interest in the Middle East. We know it. Some countries don't like it. The Saudis don't like it. They would like US support in terms of confronting Iran. They're angry with the US for leaving the region. They even didn't answer President Biden's phone call on March the 8th. The Emiratis are also angry by this. They also did not answer President Biden's call on the 8th of March. But this is a fact. It's happening, and because the U.S. is leaving the region, excuse me, these countries, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and especially, are improving relations with the State of Israel because they know the U.S. is leaving the region. Now, the U.S. is symbolically involved in facilitating talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I don't want to comment on the Sahara issue because that's a different issue. But they know that, first of all, there's not much they can do. They also have their focus elsewhere. Look at what's happening in Ukraine. Look at what's happening with China. So I would say, first and foremost, the U.S. is leaving the region. Second of all, the U.S. is involved in some of these peace talks, but not in the same extent as before. It's far more symbolic because the United States has other issues and crises to handle, and President Biden, there's only so many minutes in the day that his administration can dedicate to different problems, and the problems around the world in Ukraine and China are becoming so big that he doesn't have enough time to deal seriously as he did before, especially with the Palestinian issue.
Mir Javed Anfar, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your insights today and for talking to WION.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.